Welcome into the Thunder basketball universe presented by COOP Ale Works. You might notice if you're watching us on YouTube that we're coming to you not from our normal studio, but we're coming to you today from Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is the home of Thunder Fellows. And if you follow the podcast for some time now, you'll know that Thunder Fellows is a pretty big project for the organization. It's centered around giving opportunities to Black youth in Tulsa to careers in sports, entertainment, and tech through a curriculum based in analytics and STEM.
That's right. Paris and I, we got back from Houston last night with the team. We hit the Turnpike early this morning, came up to Tulsa. We're here in the heart of Greenwood District. And really, this is a project that the Thunder is so proud of, and it's something that is meant to be long-term, sustainable, and lasting here in Tulsa to make sure that those types of opportunities that maybe haven't necessarily been there for Black youth in this city are there moving forward, and that's something the Thunder is really proud of. We're happy to come up and just do a little check-in, and we'll talk some basketball with you as well.
Yeah, last time we were up here, last time we talked about Thunder Fellows on this podcast, we had Executive Director Cedric Ikpo, who was kind of a new hire at that point. He didn't have his full staff quite yet, and I don't believe the building was done yet, so it's really cool to see how this place is coming together. And now their first cohort, they are off and running. They have hit the ground, and they are in the thick of it right now.
So many really great activations and presentations that they've had from companies all over the country that have come in and really taught the data analytics and also injected a lot of fun into some of those activities. And we're just continuing to see as we track the program, just the ways in which some of these students are really growing, not just educationally, but outside of education in terms of their personal characteristics as well. So definitely something to just keep an eye on. Make sure you follow the Thunder Fellows social channels, and be sure to just check back up on the program and support it as well. One
of the coolest things that, from our perspective, that we've gotten to see the Fellows get to do during the Thunder's preseason game in Tulsa, the Thunder Fellows came out and they got to meet some of the players. They got to meet Lou Dort, Darius Baisley, Mark Dagnall, and of course got to meet Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is the namesake of the game that we're about to play here. You can say that again.
Right. And one other thing, Paris, the players actually came to the Thunder Fellows office and got to see where these kids are learning, where they're coming after a long day of school, sometimes after sports practice as well, and they're gearing up and turning their brains on again at 6 o'clock at night to make sure that they're continuing to invest in themselves. And so this is very inspiring to the players, just like the players and the Thunder organization has been inspiring to some of these kids too.
And it's been so cool to see this program blossom over these past few months, and the great work that the staff here, Cedric and the two new staff members, Lakina and Ricky, they're doing a great job over here at Thunder Fellows. So like Gallo said, be sure to follow Thunder Fellows on all social media platforms. You're really going to want to see how these kids develop throughout the program. All right, should we talk some basketball?
Let's do it.
All right, let's get into You Can Say That Again. By the way, the team just got back from a road trip in Houston. It was just a one-off road trip, and like you said, got back from there at about midnight here in Oklahoma City, and we're here in Tulsa right now the very next day. And tomorrow, the Thunder will get a chance to play Houston again. They lost in Houston against the Rockets, and now they have an opportunity here 48 hours later to play them again.
Yeah, not to step on the toes of You Can Say That Again, but we talked to Ty Jerome after practice today, and he just said this is an ideal scenario from like a hooper standpoint. You think about Paris, anytime that you play pickup and you lose, you want to be able to run it back. Exactly. And so that's basically what the Thunder gets the opportunity to do here. And they've got some guys that just, they play for the love of the game and for the love of competition. And you could tell in that fourth quarter, the Thunder, when they knew, the comeback was not going to quite get there, you could tell that they were already itching to get to play those guys again.
This is a competitive group, and you can tell that they're looking forward to that opportunity. Okay, let's get into You Can Say That Again. Gallo, you got first.
Okay. Mine is, they should probably headbutt each other instead of hand the baton.
I think I laughed for 30 straight seconds after Mark said this, and it was off your question.
This was pregame a few nights ago, and this comment has a little bit of a different texture to it now because of what's happened since. But I asked Mark about basically this concept that the Thunder had going, where when Lou Dort would check out of the game and Kenrich Williams would check into the game, that was kind of that handing of the baton moment where Lou would be defending the opposing team's very best player, best offensive scorer on the perimeter, and then Kenrich would check in and he would really take care of that business on the second unit against the kind of elite microwave scorer coming off the bench for the opposing team. This is tinted a little bit with Kenrich Williams' ankle sprain, and it's going to leave some interesting decisions and some things for Thunder fans to really track over the next few games as we find out more about how long Kenrich will be out, of how the Thunder deals with some of these big-time offensive weapons from opposing teams. You think about Houston again with Christian Wood and Eric Gordon and Kevin Porter Jr. Those guys are going to be players that the Thunder has to deal with, and then turn around one night later in Memphis on Thursday, and you got a whole host of guys that you have to deal with down there too.
Definitely, and I love that you asked this question to Mark, because the context behind this is that really in any lineup, one of those two guys are on the floor at any given time. And Mark has said that it's because you need somebody, a dog defender, who you can trust to go out there and really cause problems on the defensive end. Now, with Kenrich out, the same thing applies for the Thunder as it does with any, opening or vacancy in the roster or in the lineup. It's an opportunity for other guys to step up, and even for other guys who are just already maybe in the rotation or already have a defined role of some sort to be put in a little bit of a stress test or in a new environment and see how they operate there. It's all about getting a chance to explore the roster and explore the different areas and different things that guys bring to the table, and that's exactly what the Thunder is trying to do as they figure out that second unit and what it's going to look like.
Yeah, and the key for the Thunder is identifying, okay, who are the players that, with Kenrich out, can headbutt Lou as he checks out of the game and bring that same hard-nosed mentality on the defensive end.
Yep, that's exactly what me and you do when
right.
we're, pregame hits, you're done. Headbutt on to the next one.
Paris getting geared up for her first quarter hit, and, we just knock noggins and we get it going.
Yeah, it explains a lot, actually.
Yeah. All right, Paris.
Okay. Mine is simply, Shea's the man.
Shea is the man. This was a really
another Mark Dagnall quote.
Yeah, a really well delivered line from Mark.
Yes, and this was after the Houston game last night, I believe. Before the Houston game, that's right. Because we talked to Tre Mann before the game, and Tre pointed to a scenario where after practice on Saturday before that game, Shea asked, he was like, "Hey, Rook, come rebound for me."
Yeah.
And so you're not going to say no if you're Tre Mann and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander asks you to come rebound for him. So he goes, and Shai proceeds to do this workout that he does pretty regularly, and he tries to get 200 shots in under 20 minutes. And so after the 20 minutes have gone by, Tre's about to walk off the floor with the basketball, about to go head to the showers. It's like, Shai's like, "Where are you going?"
Yeah, you're up next.
You're up next.
Yeah.
Do exactly what I just did. And that is such a cool moment. And me pointing this out and pointing out the Shai's the man quote is because Shai had the perspective, and Mark pointed this out, that he can see around the corner. He can have that big picture perspective of recognizing there's a rookie that, we're trying to invest in as an organization, and that has potential clearly to be great and be really helpful for this team. I can help here, and I can bring him in, take him under my wing, and show him what it looks like to get to where, I've gotten so far.
Yeah, I mean, when you project out the future of this team, you're going to need guys who are drafted late first round, sometimes in the second round. You're going to need those guys to pop and be big-time contributors for your team. Shai, as you're saying, can see the big picture and recognize Tre Mann is the type of guy that if he's coming off the bench someday, if he's starter, whatever that may be, he's going to provide spacing, and he's going to provide an offensive punch to this team that can really alleviate some pressure from him, from Josh Giddey, from Lou Dort, and is just another extremely valuable weapon for this team moving forward. And it's not necessarily always about speeding up the development curve, but this is a moment in practice where Shai recognized an opportunity of like, I can get him better today. Mm-hmm. And I can, and what Shai said too is, I wanted to get better that day too.
Right.
And that is why Shai is the man.
And I also want to point out here, just from a player's perspective, on the floor in Houston now, let's take it a couple days later. You're on the floor in Houston. Shai's on the floor with Tre. Okay, now if I'm Tre, I know that I've worked out with Shai now. Mm-hmm. I've gotten a glimpse of what it takes to be, where he's at. I've worked out with him. He's helped me. And so there's a chemistry factor there that also plays, I think, a big role in growing and developing as a team. It's the mental side of things. It's the emotional side of things. Knowing that Shea trusts me and Shea believes in me and Shea thinks that I can do what he does. That instills a lot of confidence in a guy. And I'm not saying that Tre's lacking in confidence. I don't think he is at all. But
he's just calibrating how to get that confidence into the game.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think having that, Shea has done a great job of this. And Mark has pointed it out multiple times that Shea does a great job of instilling confidence in his teammates. That's an example of that right there.
Yeah. And, thinking about that Houston game, it was not not a pretty shooting performance by either team. It was pretty ugly out there for both squads. I would have liked to see Tre Mann take 200 shots in 20 minutes in that game, given the way that he was able to shoot it. He went off for a season high, or career high, I should say, 17 points in that game on some pretty efficient shooting.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the stat sheet right now. He took 12 field goals, or he took 12 shots in that game. The game before that, against Washington, 11.
Right.
And that was his first game back after going down to the OKC Blue, and that was after he had a little bit of a twist in his ankle and had to sit out a little bit. But since he came back, I mean, every time Tre comes back, it seems like he adds a little bit more comfort, a little bit more confidence. And this has been the push that the coaching staff has been, encouraging for Tre. Shoot the ball more.
Yeah.
Let's see what you can do. We know that you can create space for yourself. We know that you can create shots for yourself. Show us. Go do it. Don't be scared. Don't hold back. And we're seeing that now with Tre. 12 shots in a game, 11 shots the day before. He's starting to develop that consistency of finding those opportunities for himself.
He needs to be a gravity player, and I'm not comparing him to any of these guys, but you see what defenses have to go through when Damian Lillard and Steph Curry and Trae Young are coming off of screens and taking shots from 26, 27 feet and making them with accuracy. If Tre Mann can be a guy that is able to knock some of those shots down and be a threat to just create his own shot off the bounce, that changes everything about how the opposing defense has to guard the entire Thunder 5-man unit.
And the reason everybody's going down to the OKC Blue, everybody that's been assigned there has a different reason for why they're down there. For some, it's a minute squeeze situation where like this guy is really good, but he's just not in the rotation right now. There are other guys that we're prioritizing, so he's just not getting minutes. So we're going to send him down to the OKC Blue. For Tre, this is an opportunity for him to develop aspects of his game. And one area that the coaching staff has really been wanting to see more from him is on the defensive end.
Right.
And in that Houston game, I feel like we saw a lot of Tre emphasizing that for himself, getting all over the floor, hunting for those rebounds. He had 7 rebounds in that game.
Yeah.
That's a career high for him. That indicates to me that, okay, Tre is listening, he's learning, and he is putting forth, pedal to the metal, trying to get that area of his game grown, so because he knows that that's his key to being on the floor.
Yeah, I think about some of his very first games with the Thunder. He was taking charges, and even in summer league he took a charge. And I remember asking him about that and saying, I wasn't expecting that the first time I wore an NBA jersey that I would be taking a charge, because he's probably usually one of the smaller guys on the floor. But that's something that the Thunder coaching staff wanted to see, and such a great line from Mark Daigneault while we're talking about quotes. You can shade that again. Was just saying. When we have guys go to the G League, when they go to the Blue, if they dog it, we'd expect them to just dog it with the Thunder. And if they go in and they dive head first, well, then we know, okay, they're going to dive head first when they get to the NBA level and get into that competition too. And Tre Mann, he has been diving in head first in all of those opportunities.
If anybody knows what to expect from a player when they come from the G League, it's Mark Daigneault.
That's right.
Yeah, from his experience. All right, let's get into Name That Dude, Gallo. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Let's stay on subject. This person scored 15 points, added 8 rebounds, 9 assists, a block, and a steal.
Was this from the Houston game?
This was not from the Houston game.
Oh, it was from the Washington game.
It was, and we haven't podcasted with you since before the Utah game.
Oh, goodness.
So before Thanksgiving. So we got to make it up to you and talk about a few of these games. So that's why I pulled from the Washington game.
All right. You're going to have to give me a hint here. Oh, actually, that's Shea. That's Shea. That's a
Shea.
near triple-double.
That's right.
that's Shea.
That was Shea. It was his first game back after he'd missed a couple games with the ankle sprain. And Mark Daigneault had just talked about how Shea really put in the work over that time, coming off of a stretch of 5 games in 7 nights, 3 games in 4 nights. The fact that he was able to get his body right and get the rest that he needed, but also do the rehab that he needed to be back on the floor and to perform at a really high level.
Yeah.
He started that game with 8 points and 5 assists in the first quarter alone. That was the first time he'd ever had an 8.5 assist quarter in his career.
That was going to be the thing that stuck out to me the most from that performance from Shai, was just how he was able to just step onto the floor and immediately impact the game. Obviously, he can impact the game at any turn. He does that so well. That's why he is who he is. But I think that was an indicator to me that, Shai does not like being off the floor.
No.
He is a competitor. He loves the work to be a great player.
Yeah.
And you don't hear that often. You hear guys who love to be great and who love to take the big shots.
And love to play the game.
And love to play the game. Shai loves the work that goes into taking those big shots.
Right.
And we see that all the time in practice. In that scenario that we talked about with Tre and Shai, the floor was practically emptied after practice that day. Shai is known for being one of the last guys to leave the floor after practices. And so for him to step out onto the floor, immediately jump in head first and be as effective as he was, that speaks loudly to what we already kind of knew about Shai to begin with, was that he's going to work to be on the floor, and he's going to work to make sure that he's his best when he's on the floor.
And finding ways to impact the game that aren't necessarily just scoring. We had seen such a massive explosion of scoring from Shai. Those sidestep threes were really falling. Those aren't dropping for him right now, and he's trying to figure out other ways to counter that, to deal with the way that teams are defending that shot, defending some of his other actions. His ability to get to the rim is, being challenged by defenses who are crashing over and doubling and all of those things. For him to be able to secure boards, to dish out assists. He even had some nice ones in Houston, too. He found a couple guys on little drop-off bounce passes and stuff. So he's learning more and more, and this is a part of every young player's growth, Paris, is when the defenses counter your best stuff, what are your next pitches? How do you continue to evolve as a player?
In that Houston game, Shai had 10 points in the first quarter. All 10 came from the paint. And the three-point shot was not falling for the Thunder in that first quarter. That would be the theme throughout the entire night. It just wasn't falling. It wasn't breaking in their direction. And Shai had all 10 of his points in that paint. Now, when Coach Dagnall talks about you have to find grimier ways to score, I feel like Shai has a really good balance of being able to recognize that. And even within his own game, if my shot's not falling, I know I can still impact the game by, attacking the paint, being that gravity player and drawing some attention, kicking it out to the three-point line, or getting to the free throw line. He did a great job of that as well. And so I think your point is well made that the balance that Shai showed in these past two games since he's returned has been really, really strong.
And your mention of the free throw line, that's somewhere that Shai can even get better at, because last year he was, I believe, top 15 in that category. He's around 25th this season. So continuing once he gets in there to draw that contact and get fouled, it would be another huge boost. And you just think about the difference between, in this league, a 20-point-per-game scorer and a 25-point-per-game scorer. Sometimes it's just a handful of free throws.
Just a handful of free throws. Nobody within the Thunder organization is a finished product. That was a Mark Dagnall quote. You can say that again.
Nice callback.
There we go.
All right. What's your name that dude?
All right. 17 points, 5 rebounds, 8 for 10 from the field. I'll be surprised if you don't get it.
This is our guy, Zero.
Zero.
Yeah.
And this was in Houston. And in the previous 2 games, Isaiah was out of the rotation.
9 out of the last 13 games he hadn't
played. He has just been kind of squeezed out of the rotation. And he didn't know he was going to play in Houston until 3 o'clock that afternoon before the game. Derek Favors started to develop flu-like symptoms, and it turned out he did have the flu, and he would be out for that game. Mike Muscala was a late scratch in that game with some ankle soreness. And so it was next man up in real time very quickly for Isaiah Roby, and he stepped in and showed that his readiness put it right on display.
Yeah, he played physically. He had to go in there and he had to defend Christian Wood for portions of that game. He rebounded well, as you mentioned, Paris, just with the field goal percentage. I mean, he shot the ball very well. At one point, the Thunder only had a couple made three-pointers, and one of them was Isaiah Roby on a baseline out-of-bounds play.
Right.
And, the fact that he could come in and have that level of readiness. I mean, we heard Tre Mann talk about this, that Isaiah, being in year 3 in the NBA, is somebody that Tre looks up to as a guy like, hey, this is a guy that's ready. He's always talking to me on the bench. He's always engaged in the game. that's really impressive given that Isaiah is, young 20s, 23, I think. And so just something to consider moving forward, that if a guy is not necessarily in the rotation right now, it's very likely over the course of an 82-game season, they will be in the rotation at some point, or they'll be called upon at some point.
I love what Isaiah said after the game, after the Houston game. He said, not playing as much as I did last year. Yeah, it's tough, it's difficult, and it's a different mentality that I have to have, but it makes you appreciate the time on the floor that much more. And you could see that literally when he stepped onto the floor, and the effort and the energy that he showed in that game, that he enjoyed being out there, and he knew that he needed to make his minutes count. I mean, just like every other guy on this Thunder roster, when they get onto the floor, they want to make their minutes count. But for Isaiah, it was cool to see that happen kind of in real time, and to hear him talk about after the game. And he had an injury, his first year, that for the first time in his career, he wasn't able to really play. And so his appreciation for the game, his appreciation for minutes on the floor is really big right now.
Yeah, and I think he speaks to a bigger trend that we're seeing this season, where rookie players and rookie players last year, he was kind of really sort of in his first year with the Thunder last season, given a lot of room to just explore their games. We're seeing that with Josh Giddey and Trey and Jeremiah Robinson-Earl and Aaron Wiggins when they've gotten their minutes this season. The second-year players, and I include Isaiah in that mix, Alexei Pokusevski, Teo Maledon, they're being asked now, after last season of really getting to explore and just soak up as many minutes as they can, they're being asked, okay, can you perform, but in a tighter window?
Right.
Can you be efficient with your minutes? Can you be a guy that comes in, and we're really trying to hone and develop these skills of being a solid 15 to 20 minute, 10 to 17 minute role player in the NBA? Because if you can do that, okay, well, maybe we can bite off a little bit more.
Right.
Maybe we can bite off a little bit more as a legitimate two-way efficient player in this league, as opposed to just rolling those guys out there and seeing what they are.
And we've seen different guys do that at different points throughout the season. The Thunder bench had 52 points against Houston. That's a big number, and that's because Isaiah Roby stepped up and had 17 points. Also, Tre Mann. These are two guys that we weren't talking about, 2 weeks ago when, the Thunder was in Milwaukee or Boston or Atlanta. That was Kenrich Williams. It was Mike Muscala. It's different guys stepping up off the bench that we've seen. And even Alexei Pokusevski stepping up, having his moments as well. But it's been different guys throughout the season. And as the season progresses, it's going to be different guys almost every single night, because that's kind of the luxury that the Thunder has, being able to send guys down to the blue, being able to put guys in different spots and rotations. If ever there's a vacancy like there is right now with Kenrich Williams, they can slide some guys over and kind of, and be creative with the rotation in the lineup, just to be able to explore and see what these guys can offer in different situations.
Yeah, and Mark Daigneault has talked about, you don't want necessarily a smooth development path for these guys. You want them to have to overcome some things. You want them to have to get some minutes with the Thunder and then play for the Blue and be put into a different role. A guy like Teo Maledon goes from being one of the youngest guys on the team with the Thunder to a guy that everybody's looking around as okay, Teo, you're sort of the leader of the Blue when you're on the floor as the point guard and the floor general. That is good for him moving forward. You think about rock climbing, you don't just have a smooth wall to be able to get up the wall. You need those little crags to put your fingers in and hold on to. And so sometimes those little rough spots, those can be the things that really help you move up the mountain a little bit.
Absolutely. And we're seeing these guys grow with every minute that they have on the floor. They're taking advantage of it. That's the other key to this. You can't grow and develop with the small minutes that you have if you don't make the most of them on the floor. And so Poku, Teo, Ty Jerome as well, we're seeing some big stuff from him in terms of efficiency with his minutes. They've all done a really good job of soaking up the lessons, soaking up the time that they have on the floor, and making sure that they carry that with them into whatever their next opportunity is, whether that's time with the Thunder, time with the Blue, coming off the bench in the starting lineup. It rotates like that. It's a wide range of opportunities for these guys, but they're making the most of it and they're learning how to develop within it. We're going to take a short break here, and we'll be right back after this.
COOP Ale Works is the proud sponsor of Thunder Basketball Universe. Brewers of the fan favorites F5 IPA and 99-calorie Ice Chest IPA. You'll find those and many more COOP beers at retailers across Oklahoma. Learn more at CoopAleWorks.com.
One of the bright spots for the Thunder throughout the month of November has been its defense and the growth that we've seen from the Thunder on the defensive end. It's shown up not just in terms of the eye test, but on the stat sheet as well. And Gallo, you wrote a fantastic article. It is now up on OKCThunder.com about the growth that the Thunder has demonstrated on that end of the floor.
Yeah, it's really the checklist of efficiency, which Mark Daignault has talked about on the defensive end. Some of the core principles and things that you have to do on defense each night. It's getting back in transition. It's protecting the paint. It's not fouling. It's getting a hand up to contest shots, and then it's sealing off those possessions with a defensive rebound. And if you look at the Thunder's numbers from the month of November, they're marking off all of those things on the checklist. Let me run down some of these for you. I'm not going to give away the entire piece. Got to make sure that you actually go and click on that link that you see on OKC Thunder's social channels and over there on OKCThunder.com. But the Thunder has the 6th best defensive rating in the entire NBA in the month of November. They've allowed the 5th fewest points per game, 103.2 points per game, and then a few others here. The 2nd fewest fast break points allowed, the 3rd best defensive rebounding percentage, the third most total contested shots per game, the 3rd lowest field goal percentage allowed, just 42.2%, 4th fewest second chance points allowed, 4th fewest points in the paint allowed, and then the 6th fewest free throw attempts allowed. So when you think about that whole checklist that we just laid out, they're hitting all of them.
The one that I want to point out and talk to you about that I find the most fascinating, especially as the youngest team in the league, is this pairing of the points per game. Sorry, I'm looking at all of these numbers right now. The 4th fewest points allowed per game, 5th fewest. I apologize. Okay, 5th fewest points allowed per game, but also the 6th fewest free throw attempts per game. It's this idea of being aggressive on the defensive end, but doing it without fouling. And for a young team, that is very, very impressive.
Yeah, and there's one kind of ringleader of that's Darius Bazley. He fouls less than 1 time per game, despite the fact that he's had such incredible defensive assignments night after night after night. I mean, you think about even last night against Houston, he got assigned Eric Gordon,
right,
who is not a normal guy that he would be having to defend on a night-to-night basis. He's defended Kevin Durant and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis, he forced him into 6 of 16 shooting up there in Milwaukee, no dunks, 1 foul by Darius Bazley in 33 minutes. That is really impressive, and it forces the opposition to beat you in other ways, than more difficult ways. In Giannis had to hit a spinning turnaround mid-range jump shot to put that game away against the Thunder. That's not the way that Giannis and the Bucks usually have to win these games. Usually they win them running away because Giannis has gotten to the free throw line 15 times. That wasn't the case. And so when the Thunder forces the opposing team to have just that smaller margin of error, that's when they get into more of these crunch time opportunities. And those are the types of opportunities that are going to make this team better long term when they get those experiences, having to execute against the best of the best.
I love that point. And they have gone up against some really tough, stout competition, Eastern Conference playoff teams and reigning champion Milwaukee Bucks. And with each game, it seems like there's a different lesson that they learn in terms of, against Milwaukee, it was the physicality that you have to bring on the defensive end. Well, against a different team like Utah, it's the discipline in terms of being sharp on everything because they can hit you from the inside out. Every single game, every turn, it seems like there's just something else that they're soaking in and taking with them into the next game. But the one thing that this boils down to, and I love the way you put it in terms of the checklist, because it boils down to being able to control what you can control in every single game. You can never control whether or not the ball falls through the hoop. You can put yourself in really good positions. You can make sure that you're taking an efficient shot that normally goes in, but you can't control all the time whether or not the ball falls through the hoop. Same thing goes for your opponent. But you can always control if you get back in transition, if you're matched up, if you talk, if you're communicative, if you box out and find a body and secure a rebound. Those are the things that you can control every single night. And I think this Thunder team has really tapped into that, whereas, every single game, I know what I need to, I can compete, I can bring my intensity and my effort, and I can make sure that I have this checklist in the back of my head.
I'm glad that you mentioned the communication, because that's kind of the glue that holds all of that stuff together on defense, that whole checklist. it comes from the communication. Darius Baisley told me he feels just more comfortable, more safe out there as a player when he hears his teammates chattering. And Shea, at the beginning of the season, he said, one thing I've learned over the course of my years in the league is the best defensive teams are the ones that talk the most.
And as an offensive player, if you hear the defense chattering like that, in my experience, it's put me kind of on edge. Like, okay, what are they doing here? What are they scheming? What do they know that I don't know? But it from being in that position and knowing that your teammates have your back, that's also very comforting as well, just from a communication standpoint.
Harris, that's why we're such a good team. We're always talking. We've got a text thread
Literally
going. We're on
never
Microsoft
stop
Teams.
talking.
We've got like 6 different conversations happening all at the same time.
We have a show about us
That's
talking.
right.
Clearly it's working well. But yeah, be sure to go to OKCThunder.com and find that article. It goes through everything on the defensive end that has been so successful for the Thunder. Really great stuff, Gallo.
Thanks.
Really great stuff.
Appreciate that, Paris.
All right, before we let you go, we got to let you know what's on tap for this group. Like we mentioned, Houston, the Thunder gets a second crack at them, which actually is going to be the 4th time the Thunder has played Houston this season, and it'll be the last time as well.
Already done with the Rockets on December 1st. That's pretty crazy.
It is. So that game is going to be on Wednesday, and then the team turns around and plays immediately in Memphis on Thursday. That's the second night of a back-to-back. So going to be a really tough turnaround for the team, but a really good test in terms of a road home situation for OKC.
Yeah, the fact that they're getting a chance to, as we said, kind of just check ball again and go up against the same guys in Houston, that's a really great learning opportunity for this team. Let's see how they apply those lessons. It's not always a one-to-one where you see that you did something poorly and then you go out and you fix it all the next game, but that's a good sign. And as Mark Daigneault has talked about, this team wants to be in the playoffs someday. That's a playoff skill, to be able to learn from game 1 of a playoff series and then go out and do it all better in game 2. And then it's the real life of being in the 3rd game of 4 nights and having to fly to Memphis after the game and do it all over again against a team that you haven't seen yet this season. So that'll be a big challenge. And then Paris, Thunder has 3 straight days off without a game after that, but we'll make sure we got a pod coming for you after that Memphis game at some point.
Don't you worry. We're not just going to be here twiddling our thumbs during those 3 days off. We got something for you. Don't you worry. But until then, be sure, thank you so much for tuning in and watching and listening. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to tune in on YouTube if you're not already. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up and catch you later.